folks. How's everybody? Just trying to give it a few seconds for a small audience to build. And we'll get started on today's topic, history of the Sergeant at Arms. Most apologize to you guys. I've been gone for a minute. Really haven't posted since the New Year's. Hey, what's up, Nathaniel? Good to see you. What's up, Norfolk, Virginia? Big Griff. Good to see you, bro. I'm blessed too, brother Nathaniel. So we definitely appreciate everybody. What's up, Lawrence Hawkins? On my way to the 2017 Pro Convention. The Pro Convention is 17 years old. It was started by a man, I believe his name was Butter, about 17 years ago. And the first PRO conference only had like a few people in it. And now it's got literally thousands of people. And what's up, Shogun? Man, I got to come up there to Canada to your karate studio, man, so we can get on down. You know, I'm getting fit now. I'm getting skinny. What's up, Black Sabbath? Hutchinson, Kansas. What's up, Daniel? Appreciate you sharing my video, Shogun. Everybody, please share my video. It lets me know when y'all do it. So, we're going to the Pro Convention where I'll be speaking. This is my second time speaking at the PRO convention, and this is where I got my start in public speaking on the motorcycle set, was at the PRO convention. So it's kind of special to me, and I feel kind of like they got me started on this whole motorcycle education thing. So big ups to the PRO convention. Like I said, when they first started, they only had like a few people, kind of like the National Roundup. You only had like 20 people or something. But through the last 17 years, now they have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that go, hundreds of motorcycle clubs. They sell out every year. One year I know they had a party that had 10,000 people in the Saturday night party. Last year when I went, it was just people wall to wall, so it was pretty good. What's up, Mike? Good to see you, brother. Nasha, what's up? So, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some things like, first of all, my new book, Sergeant at Arms Bible, is just about to drop. And with that book getting ready to drop, I want to start doing some education towards the Sergeant at Arms. And it's kind of interesting. When I started doing the research for this book, you know, we all have our ideas of what the Sergeant at Arms does. And, you know, he keeps the peace in meetings and hands out fines and takes colors, and, you know, he actually is the keeper of the bylaws, this kind of thing. So that's the spiel that we get. Hey, what's up, Brad? Cue ball. Good to see you. Angus, good to see you. So the reality, when I started doing the research for this book, it was just amazing when you come up with the 1,500 or so things that he is actually responsible to do. The Sergeant at Arms duties are prolific. They're just absolutely awe-inspiring in minutia and detail of the things that he's responsible for. So if you never really had a straight out job description, so to speak, of the Sergeant at Arms, one of the things I wanted to set out to do in the Sergeant at Arms Bible was kind of set apart like a set out almost a job description and then detail what every one of those jobs were in the job description. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is the history of the Sergeant at Arms. And that's what this video will be dedicated to, which is how the Sergeant at Arms got started. Where did this position come from? And those of you who are Sergeant at Arms, it's, and this might be a two-part video, but those of you who are Sergeant at Arms, your position is probably the most storied position in history, not just in motorcycle club history, but in history of the world. Because a Sergeant at Arms is a position that goes all the way back to feudal England. I'm talking lords and knights and kings and monarchs and those sorts of things. This Sergeant at Arms position is given to you by historical provenance. It's almost this Sergeant at Arms responsibilities are as old in organizations as civilization itself. The Sergeant at Arms is a historical knight on the battlefield, in so to speak. It's like on the chess piece, it's one of those major pieces that gets down, go backwards and sideways and carry on. The Sergeant at Arms is an amazing position to truly understand. And once you know it, and you know it well, you can take your motorcycle club to the next level in terms of with the things you can do and the responsibilities you have. So to fully understand the strength and responsibility that the Sergeant at Arms office wields and the historically important mandate placed heavily upon the soldiers, on the shoulders of this soldier sergeant, you would do well to look into the history of this worldwide, universally respected office to see from whence this officer's authority came and how it was forged and established. And from there, you can just now begin to understand the significance of the Sergeant at Arms inside of the motorcycle club. So, Sergeant at Arms is actually correctly spelled two ways. Sergeant, S-E-R-G-E-A-N-T, or Sergeant, S-E-R-J-E-A-N-T. If you were in Europe, you might spell it that way. And if you're America, you would spell it with the G. But the Sergeant at Arms, you know, there are a few definitions for it. One would be an official or legislative or other assembly member or officer whose duty includes maintaining order and security. So those are Sergeant at Arms that run like legislative bodies. Like, for instance, the House and the Senate each have a Sergeant at Arms. Another is historical, British, a knight or armed officer in the service of the monarch or a lord. So we know that back in the times of knights and medieval jousting and what have you, they had these positions called Sergeant at Arms. And then a Sergeant at Arms is also another definition would be an officer appointed by a deliberative body, usually a legislature, to keep order during the legislative meetings. So we go back to the word sergeant, and it is derived from the Latin word servens, which means servant. So already we know that a sergeant at arms is a servant. Much like Tiffany, Sergeant versus Sergeant. I wanted to name my book the second title, but I thought people would be like, oh, you misnamed it. And You didn't spell it right, so I didn't want to draw away from it, but I kind of like the second spelling. I think it's like really cool, right? So we already get the meaning that the sergeant at arms is a servant. We already get that from the fact that the word comes from the Latin servens, which means servant. So the sergeant at arms is number one, the servant of the MC. So the fourth definition we'll give is that the sergeant at arms is the fourth officer in line to the succession of the presidency of a traditional motorcycle club. So he comes after the president, the vice president, and the secretary or treasurer, depending on which one your club has. So now we have established who and what the sergeant at arms has, the definitions of sergeant at arms. So when we look at the origin of the sergeant at arms and where they come from, there are two main definitions of a sergeant at arms. And for one is a military rank, and another is a governmental or administrative rank. So as a military rank, that was a rank that was held in feudal times. We don't have sergeant at arms in the military anymore. We do have sergeants, first sergeant, second sergeant, first class sergeant, second class, that sort of thing. But there are no like sergeant at arms in the military. But there was a time when you had a military type sergeant at arms, and then you have an administrative or governmental type sergeant at arms. And in the governmental administrative type sergeant at arms of today, that we know of today, they have a very interesting duty, and that's a law enforcement duty. Now, so most organizations like the Kiwanis or the such and such, fraternity might have a sergeant at arms, or the legislature might have a sergeant at arms. So they will have two duties. One would be a law enforcement, like they hold the accountability system. If you screw up, the sergeant at arms gives you a fine. That's his like law enforcement duty. Now in a governmental and administrative place, the sergeant at arms law enforcement duty might be to actually arrest somebody. But in the military, or rather in the motorcycle club, sergeant at arms has an actual military duty. So the motorcycle club is interesting because it brings a sergeant at arms back from the times of feudal warring and knights in shining armor, where we kind of got rid of the military sergeant at arms. But the motorcycle club definitely has three positions that a sergeant at arms fills. One is administrative, governmental, holding the office meetings, blah, blah, blah. Two is a law enforcement kind of thing that he holds the accountability system of the motorcycle club. He is the person that makes sure that you are accountable when you're fined or whatever. The sergeant at arms collects the fine, that sort of thing. But three, there's a military component, which is very interesting because the sergeant at arms is the one who is responsible for the security of the MC, protecting the MC against enemies, and having a protection or reactionary or readiness force that would keep the MC safe if they came under duress. So these are some interesting things we learn about the sergeant at arms when we start to research his position and where he comes from. The soldier sergeant in times of old days, the military days, back in the time of King Arthur and those kind of folks, the soldier sergeant was a man of middle class, fulfilling a slightly junior role to a knight. So in those armies, you had positions, and a knight was like one of your biggest, baddest pieces. And a knight cost a lot of money to outfit. You had to buy the chain mail, the suit, the swords. If you were a king, you had to buy all this. He had a horse, and he had several people assigned to him to help him get on the horse and pick him up when he fell. A knight cost a lot of money. So you had these soldier sergeants, these sergeant at arms, that were a little bit less. Now, they could be mounted like cavalry, but they didn't necessarily, or they could be a mounted cavalry, but they weren't as outfitted as a knight, so they didn't cost as much. So they were only worth about, a little bit less than a knight. But they were like journeymen. They were like middle class in medieval hierarchy. The soldier sergeant can fight either as heavy to light cavalry or as a well-trained professional infantry, like a spearman or a Finnish bowman or a crossbowman. Medieval mercenaries would often fall into the sergeant class, as well as Flemish crossbowmen and spearmen. So these were considered reliable troops, and by reliable troops, they weren't serfs, they weren't peasants, they were folks that you paid. They were professional soldiers, so they weren't enslaved, they weren't indentured into servitude. They actually were volunteers or mercenaries. They were people that were treated well. The sergeant class was deemed to be, therefore, half of a knight, or perhaps a little more. But when they were situated as light or heavy cavalry, they could be deemed to cost about as much as a knight. So it's kind of cool. So that, was the military sergeant at arms. The law enforcement sergeant at arms. So how did sergeant at arms get into an actual real law enforcement thing? Because they were they moved from the battlefield into servitude under a law enforcement kind of a role. So this sergeant class, was also used in England to serve in the sovereign palace, to serve the king, in a role like a police officer or a bailiff in more recent times. So initially, they were the personal attendants of the king. They were bodyguards, these sergeant at arms, or they stood at table, which meant they were at the king's table when he ate. They might have been tasters, or they might have been there in case somebody tried to kill the king. They were there to protect the king. So as the king found that he needed people he could trust to do more things, let's see some of the other things they said they did. They served to provide fodder, or they served to provide arrows, all kinds of things, these little things that they would do. And so as the king decided that he needed these, they were called sergentes at that time. And so he wanted the sergentes to move from the personal bodyguard. He might need you to go out in town and handle some kind of military or law-like enforcement, like a bailiff, maybe kick somebody out of their house, or press indentured servants into the naval, maybe conscript some people, something like that. So he would move these people from a part-time position to a full-time position, and they became sergeant at arms. They were required to be in immediate attendance at the sovereign's person, like bodyguards, but they would also do things like arrest treasonous people, people suspected of treason, or arrest traitors, or collect loans that the king put out, or impress men and ships in the service, and are serving on the local administration along with other duties. So these cats started getting into things as their sergeant and armedness started to gather some teeth. They started becoming tough men and pressing stuff around. Then as bodyguards, as a result, the sergeants at arms constitute the oldest royal bodyguard in England, because then the kings just pressed them straight into bodyguarding. For instance, King Richard I, around 1189, was the first to press the sergeant at arms into royal bodyguard duty as straight up royal bodyguards for the king. And he conferred the first title, sergeant at arms. It also appears during the Crusades, the reign of King Philip II, the reign of King Philip II of France in 1192. Richard I had 24 sergeant-at-arms with him on the Crusades. So when he rode on the Crusades, he had 24 men riding as his personal bodyguard. In 1278, they were formed into 20-strong corps of sergeants-at-arms by King Edward I and served as a mounted close escort. So they rode next to the king in King Edward. And then in 1339, King Richard II limited the corps to 30 sergeants. King Charles II, King Charles II limited it to 16, and then the number started to be reduced after that. They're still there, but much smaller in number. So, kind of interesting, the history of these sergeant-at-arms folks and how they came about. Now, when we look at the origins of the sergeant-at-arms in government, the origin of the sergeant-at-arms in government is kind of interesting. The formal role of the modern government administrative sergeant-at-arms in legislative bodies to keep order during meetings and, if necessary, forcibly remove people who are overly rowdy or disruptive. They perform a number of administrative duties and custodial tasks as well, but their jobs can still put them in harm's way. So we're talking about bodyguards like the Senate, bodyguards of the House, bodyguards of other legislative bodies around the world. Like, for instance, let's see, there was, let me find that. Yeah. So we say that their work can still put them in harm's way, even though they have these custodial tasks, and even though their job is limited to like get out of order. But we can go back to 2014 when Canadian Vickers engaged in a gunfight with a cowardly terrorist whose name I will not mention, but he attacked the Canadian House of Commons in a hailstorm of gunfire. After murdering Canadian soldier Corporal Nathan Cirillo, 24 years old, who was standing guard, Nathan Rillo, who was standing guard at Canada's War Memorial. And Vickers attacked heroically along with Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constable Curtis Barrett and eliminated the cowardly suspect who tried to commit this murder. And so, as a sergeant-at-arms, a legislative body, you guys might remember this sergeant-at-arms stepped out and risked his life like the soldier sergeants of the past to keep the Canadian Parliament protected. So, the United Kingdom has sergeants-at-arms. The United States government has sergeants-at-arms. The first Congress in 1789 and 1791 adopted many of the traditions of the British Parliament, including the tradition of sergeant-at-arms. So we have a sergeant-at-arms of the Congress and a sergeant-at-arms of the Senate and the House. And so they both came into being at about 1789. What else? And not long ago we had a guy get into, oh, my connection is weak, that sucks, hope it doesn't cut out, but we had not too long ago a sergeant-at-arms or a guy follow some guys into one of our congressional halls and murder some folks. And he was the responsibility of the sergeant-at-arms. So, as we have seen, we're looking at history, we've seen these sergeant-at-arms as soldiers for the king, soldiers on the battlefield, worth about half of a night or more, move into personal attendants of the king, and then were placed into bailiff and law enforcement duties, then went into governmental administrative duties, working for legislative bodies. Then we saw them work in Congress and places like that, and we've seen them risk their lives. And this is a long, storied history of these folks. And then, as administrative people worldwide, the position of sergeant at arms is popular today in all types of organizations, including fraternities, sororities, social clubs, Masonic lodges, charities, law enforcement bodies, motorcycle clubs, and many others. The position still bears the hallmark of confidence, wisdom, and safety that it has since the medieval times of the soldier sergeant, employed in the service of his lord and majesty. Today's sergeant at arms are used mostly to enforce bylaws, protocols, and traditions in these organizations. They're also used to enforce their institutions' accountability systems and run elections, and the kind of administrative duties are standard among sergeant at arms worldwide. But of course, the MC Brotherhoods, sergeant at arms, have a little bit wider responsibility. And of course, I will get into that in another one of my subsequent videos. So I just thought it would be kind of interesting for a sergeant at arms out there to know from whence you came. You guys are bad boys and girls that are in sergeant at arms positions and female motorcycle clubs. You guys are a solid glue that have a responsibility or a set of responsibilities that come far, far, far from antiquity. You are empowered by the bylaws to do the things that you do. You are empowered by the bylaws to ensure that the health of the MC remains beating through ensuring that the bylaws are kept and followed, the regalia is kept, the traditions are kept, the history is kept, and you make the MC safe for all individuals, great and small, and you make sure that no one is above the bylaws, not one officer. You stand as a character who is unmovable in your love and concern for the standard of living of the MC. You ensure that the MC is a place that is safe and fair for all members, prospects, hang-arounds, and friends. You make sure that the MC hope I'm in the right place. You make sure that the MC is everything that the bylaws promised that it would be. You have one hell of a position, and there is so much to it that you'll glean as we start doing some of these videos. And those of you who decide to purchase my book, the Sergeant at Arms Bible, when I finally get it published, I hope that you'll have a lot of fun in finding out what you find out, and discovering what you discover, and reading what you read. But we're going to do much of that in these videos too. So I hope you have a great time. The Sergeant at Arms Bible is probably, this research is probably some of the most exciting research I've done. To go back into antiquity and see where this crazy position comes from, that has always been a position of incredible nobility. It takes a person of incredible personal fortitude and an unmoving nose towards righteousness and doing things the correct way. Almost a mother hen-like ability to protect those around, looking out for the little guy, looking out for the big guy, the protection, the safety. Oh my gosh, we're just going to get into it. So I'm headed to the PROC, the Public Relations Officers Convention for 2017. It's my second time being there. I'm going to get there pretty shortly, probably less than 2 hours, I guess, right around that. And as beautiful as it is today, I kind of really wish I had ridden my still. However, I needed to do some work on my computer and stuff like that. My driver has passed out asleep, so here we are. But I slept earlier, so it's all good. But I want to do some things at the PROC that'll be fun. If you guys see me there, please come up to me and talk to me. I won't bite you, I promise. We can hang out. So many of you guys have questions that you send me all the time, so you can ask them to me in person. We sit by the fireside up there and chat till your heart's content. I'll be speaking tomorrow in the general session, and that'll be Saturday. It's sometime, I'm not sure the exact time I speak, but I'll be the second last speaker in the general session. And, make sure to stop by, get my business card, so you'll be able to get in touch with me if you want to. Shake my hand. Let's take a picture together. I love you all. I thank you for supporting all my endeavors. Black Dragon National President on YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Black Dragon National President. Also, you can catch me on Teach MC Radio, 106liveradio.com. That's an app you can download, or if you've got tuned in, you can look up 106 Live Radio, and you will be able to come Thursday nights at 9:30 and see the show, 9:30 to 11, and we talk about MC protocol, Teach MC Radio. And of course, my newest book coming out is Sergeant at Arms Bible, which will be out by the end of January. And one of my funnest books I ever wrote was the PRO's Bible, which is kind of cool because I wrote it after I went to the PRO convention. So that book is all about how to become an incredible public relations officer. And I mean a real one that you would see in an organization, one that you would see working for the President of the United States. So I don't mean someone who hands out party flyers, because that's absolutely ridiculous. Alrighty then. Any questions? That had everything. Really? Thank you. Okay, well, looks like my connection is weak. I'm out of here. See you guys at the PRO convention, if there are no questions. Well, my connection is weak, so you guys are probably just falling off. And I hate to see this thing. It's probably going to be ugly. Love you all. Take care. See you at the roundup.